and that return on investment of having an influencer make posts for you. So from the nano to the micro, medium, mega celebrity influencers, there's been a lot of talk over the last 5 or so years of, using those influencers to expand your reach to new customers for brands and having that kind of sponsored post thing. And there's a lot of energy around that. There's a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of sort of getting tired of that sort of thing as well, and being a little bit skeptical of value. But like anything in marketing too, in early stages, it's trying to figure out just how to be present in a different platform, how to reach different demographics that are adopting those platforms, especially younger demographics trying out new things, and stuff like that. So today we're going to look at the actual top 200 Instagram influencers in the United States at this time, and we can actually look at the engagement rates for those and the number of followers. And then we also made up a little bit of data on like what those influencers would cost to hire. So, depending on the number of followers and the rate that they set and the agencies they're working for, they have their own rate. Maybe $10,000 a post. It may be $1 million a post, maybe at the extreme end of the spectrum for the ultimate in celebrities. And it also may vary too. And they, create their own contracts with brands, and they may charge less for some that are very close to the things that they do and maybe more for others. And there's always, of course, some kind of negotiation involved, unless there's some sort of influencer marketing market tool, kind of like you would spend on online advertising. They also have market mechanisms where you can connect with them and purchase that posting ability. So with that, it is our Data Rockstar influencer marketing agency time. We're going to pull in that rate card like we talked about, like in anything, whether it's a magazine, old school style, or influencers. You can pull up a rate card at some of these agencies that have signed on these influencers, and we can go from there and then look at some results of what I will define as in the past. And then later on, maybe we'll have a follow up and look at some future results and see how that worked out. Were the results what you expected, and everything there. So right now we've got a simple Tableau file open. We've got our marketing agency's branding on the top there on this little dashboard, and I do not have any data in this yet. We can pop over to sheet one and see that there is no data there. So we can connect to some data. So I'm going to go to more because I think the rate card is in a CSV file. If it was an Excel file, we could choose that option, but we're going to pop into more and find that CSV file, hopefully. Looks like we have it right here in the Instagram rate card CSV. So that's pulling up right here, and you can see, if you move my head out of the way, there is an index number, and there is the Instagram username of those top ones, and you can see a bunch of your favorites right there. So we've got that. The location for all of these is United States. You can also look these up globally online, and depending on the market you're going into, focus down on whatever is relevant to what you want to do. And it looks like we've got an engagement rate there with the decimals and everything like that. And then we've got a fancy user ID for that. Besides that index number, probably won't be using that, but good to know they have that there. And then we have a rate. So it looks like number one's coming at $1 million for that incredible reach to how many users we got there on followers. 271 million followers and change. So that's great. This is our first piece of data. So one of the things we have not talked about really on this channel too much is joins. So joins are a way of connecting two pieces of data. We have another video on that talks about the different kind of Venn diagram views of different databases, which really just like, those tables of data you would see in Google Sheets or Excel, and they have something in common. So in this case, what is in common is that index number. And in this case, that actually means like influencer user ID. So when we bring in that other data, we need something that lets those two tables link together. And in database theory and everything, that's, a primary key, and then it could be a foreign key to another table. But we're not going to get too deep into that here. We just need to know there needs to be something that links. And it's just like a student ID or a social security number or an employee ID. Those are all like common IDs that let you link things together. So like you'd have your customer record ID at Amazon, and then that would have everything about your address and payment information and all of that. And then you would also have that customer ID in an order table. So you'd have the order with your UPC or whatever kind of product ID you would have, and the description and how many quantity of things you would order and all that stuff. And your customer ID would also be there in addition to that order ID. So that would link it back to know who you are. So same concept applies here. We're talking about influencers and their influencer ID here and how much it costs to hire them per post and how many followers they have and what their engagement rate is. We can tie that to the actual results from those Instagram insights and reports with all the uh, actual posts and the time that they happened and the saves and the likes and comments and views of videos and things like that. So first things first is this rate card is what we need right here. And so just going to do a quick perusal there. We were going through it, figured out United States was a geography type, figured out the numbers for all the rest. Like we said, we were pretty good to go here. So now we could actually make a graph. So we're going to go ahead and do that just with this data to see what we've got out there. Username is kind of the thing we're really focused on here. So I'm going to drop that into detail to start. Just a bunch of squares, so we're getting there. And then we can maybe pull in, let's say, the number of followers there. So we've got that. And let's click the Show Me tab and try something like a little bubble chart here. So now super quickly, we have the number of followers and the username there. So let's say followers versus engagement rates, and I can bring that engagement rate that we already have calculated for us here. It was in that rate card. I think that's a super important thing that they're probably looking at when we're pitching our influencers as this agency is, how many people are going to actually engage with this? Is it just kind of an account where like it's empty and their followers are all bots and everything like that, or are people just not that excited about it? So I don't know, there's a lot to whether someone actually types and engages or saves or likes, but that's kind of a proxy for engagement. So I'm going to drop that on color, but notice it's changing to some. So engagement rate is a rate, and you don't want to add up rates. So like 4% plus 4% is going to give you 8, which is too much. That's like double counting it. So I'm going to change that to an average. I think I'm always going to want to do that with these rates. So if you want to do that on the graph, you can drag and drop it here and change it the single time just by typing in average. But I actually want to do it every time I'm going to do that. So I'm going to Control Z back and show you how to do that. So right clicking or command clicking on a Mac on the engagement rate, you can change the default properties right down here to aggregation and average. So now every time I drop that in, it'll do that as the default. Of course, you can change it on the graph if you want, but that just makes it a little bit easier for you. And I'm going to drag and drop that onto color. So now I immediately have some cool insights. So that's really why we do graphs like these and visualize is you've got a lot of stuff on there. They were all kind of the same-ish size circle, and there's some were kind of small, and then a lot were in that kind of same range that I can't even really tell with my eye how different they are. But I'm really interested in, wow, okay, so these two, which I don't know if I want to click through these. This is a PG-13 channel. Those seem to have really high engagement per the number of followers. So they have way more engaged followers out of the total amount they do have. So that could be good or bad. Could be really angry trolls. I don't know. So there's things to investigate, but it is certainly interesting to see that range. I might actually, because that one looked a little sketchy, I might hide a couple of these and see if I can see a little bit more of a difference. I don't know what that one is. So good. Okay, I can see a little bit more of the gradations of color here. So maybe that one is one that's not going to be appropriate for my audience. And then now I can see a little bit more of the variations between that. That's one thing to think about when you have an outlier. Like if I'm looking at, all sorts of influencers and then I have The Rock on there with like hundreds of millions, maybe I'm like, okay, I can't afford The Rock right now, but I do want to see what else is happening. And I can't really see those fine distinctions between the people with 50 and 100 million followers with this kind of visualization. So I can exclude that, and that's okay. It's one thing to exclude something that's like important to show in a visualization, like when you're doing science and things like that. And it's another thing where like, okay, that's not relevant. I'm trying to show you what's happening, where we're going to make selections between. Um, these different influencers. So here's a cool one, that's followers versus engagement rate. The other thing that might be fun to do, so I'm gonna right click and duplicate that, would be to look at the rate per sponsored post. So instead, actually, we're going to do the same thing again, where you right click and then change that uh, default property. To go slow, average. There we go. And drop that onto color as well. And I'm going to change the color since we don't want to do with those defaults all the time. Maybe let's make this, it could be red. It could be red. Let's go red. Okay. So red would be expensive, and this would be followers versus rate. So the higher rate is that one right there. So it's Adidas. It's pretty crazy high. I don't know why Adidas would want a sponsorship. So obviously these numbers are fake for the sponsored post amount. It says that on the data here, just to be clear. Those aren't the real rates, but we're going to exclude Adidas just so we can see a little bit difference here between everything else. It just happened to have a crazy high number in my mock data generator. But we've got the sum of the followers, which is correct, and then you have the average of the rate for their sponsored posts, which is awesome. So that's pretty fun. Now we got two different views. That's followers versus rate and followers versus engagement rate. Let's do that followers versus, we could call it cost. We got a lot of different rates here. There's the rate of engagement and there's the rate to hire them for a post. So making that super clear what is what. Let's do another graph that we could do this a little bit differently. And let's drop in that username into detail. We've got three key metrics. We have the engagement rates, and we have the rate per sponsored posts, and we have the followers all here. And let's see, what else could we do? We have index, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to pull that there. Index should be average. So the index in this case, this was a list of the top 200 influencers of Instagram, and it was in order. So it actually is kind of a nice way to look at it because you'll see it basically by followers. So it'll have this kind of long tail where it starts out with a lot of followers and goes down. And so that should show us some little standouts like we saw earlier. There's one with a really high engagement rate that we probably don't want to click on. And then there's also, the rates, like who's too expensive. We saw that Adidas one happened to be randomly super expensive there. Just because of the fake rates we have in here. But this is where you would notice like, oh, wow, that's just way too expensive per the sponsored post. But that depends. So maybe it is so expensive, but like if it was a super yacht company and maybe they don't have as many followers, maybe they only have 300 followers, but those 300 followers are the ones that buy 300-meter yachts. And so for hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, those 300 people might be worth actually spending that. So that's an extreme example, but obviously, like if you're selling soup cans on Campbell's and maybe you have a lot of followers but not a lot of engagements, and it doesn't cost you much per engagement, and the cans of soup are like $1.49, then that's a lot different than if you have someone that's buying a cell phone, which costs $1,200, and then on average someone stays with a cell phone company for 3 years. You're looking at a lifetime value of that customer of $800 to $1,200. So it's really keeping in context, like, yes, it is more expensive per engagement, but what does that get you? So this isn't all of the information you need. You actually need to know something about your own business and your own customers and what you might be able to do with these people that you're engaging with on social, and then how does that connect to either e-commerce or in person or whatever else you want them to do. Is it valuable for that? So that was a little long-winded, but what we could do here is change these to shapes. You can make it a little more opaque, but what I like to do there is change the color to have some opacity so you can see where it overlaps. And you can also make it a little bigger, maybe make it a little lighter so we can see it even more. I'm not a huge fan of that square. Maybe try a different shape there. Let's try a different shape. You can also click this More Shapes button, and there are some other ones for other use cases as you graph other things. In this case, these are probably fine. We got our stars there. What I was going to do on followers is change that to circle. And then we can see the engagement rates in a different color, maybe green on top. And with Tableau, when you click on the second graph on something, you can click dual axis to have it overlap. So right click or command click and overlap, change it to orange for some crazy reason. But you can change that back if you want. And we'll make that a little see-through, a little more see-through as well, so you can see where it kind of layers in there. So now you can see that overlapping thing helps you see the relationship super quickly and see where there are big changes between the engagement rate and the number of followers. So here's the rates as well down below. Remember that is cut off there, so you can work with these little handlebars to drag the size and make them so you can see a little bit better, and that's an engagement rate, so you can change the format there. So right clicking on that, we're in, that's the pane in the middle and the axis is on the left. You can change that to percentage, except for that sometimes it's either already in percentage and it's the numbers, so that might not make sense in this case because it's already um, not in the decimals. So instead of that, you could just put engagement rate or percent in the title. Here, this is average index. That's not really super friendly. That's not very clear. But how about like, you know, influencer rank is actually what that means. And you can have that or not there. So maybe that, you're not really talking about like their number there because it already shows you the number of followers in orange. So, think minimal. Do you actually need to have the access there to do that? And maybe you don't. So let's call this, uh, just call it influencer metric comparison. Probably not great. You should work on creating better titles. What I like to do here is followers versus costs. It'd be like, uh, who is the most expensive compared to size? Things like that, like a question that tees everything up for you to be able to have your viewer look for the insights that you want to get across to them. So definitely mess around with the formatting. Of course, you can do all sorts of things here in Tableau, but um, that is a good start. Let's take a pause there. All right. So we've got a few different metrics for what we just have as the rate card data and what we know about influencers and their engagement rates, followers, and how much it is to hire them. But now I want to bring in the data of the past. So what have their posts been performing as before? So this is mock data, FYI. This isn't the real data from Instagram, although we could get that from a number of different services that use an API to connect to Instagram. It is a little bit tricky. So what we're doing here is just some mock data for that. And we need to connect some new data. So in the data source, we only already have this rate card data, but we actually need to add a connection to some new data and do a join like we talked about. So this data is actually in an Excel file. So I have some past data we stored. It's called Instagram Insights Past, of course. And we have that loading up here. So now it's on the left, you can see there's two connections now. It still just has this one thing on the screen, and you can see when you click on the different ones, they have a table here. So if you have an Excel with multiple tabs, you'd have multiple tables here to choose from. We have this rate card one, which there was only one, so it knew what to work with before. And now it has this other one below here that has that Instagram Insights Past. It's kind of cut off there. You can kind of see that. And then data there. So I'm going to drag and drop data here onto this space, and it's going to kind of try to link it there. So if it had the exact same name of that index that we had before, and it would probably do a good job at guessing, like if it was index on one file for index one for that first influencer and index one with that influencer posting on Instagram, it would probably figure that out in Tableau. It's pretty smart. But this is where we can link it if not. So down here, it already has, so in that influencer data, Instagram Insights, it says pick a field, and there is index, and we're going to make that equal to influencer ID. So now it's pulling it in and seeing if we can look at the data there. It looks like it linked it together just fine. So influencer data, Instagram, index. So you can see all the other fields that are in that data. And then there's this influencer ID there as well. So you have to make sure that those two things allow those tables to be linked together, like we talked about with the student ID or social security number, that kind of thing. Same idea, and they are here. So this is a join. There are other different types of relationships in Tableau and other things where it kind of figures out how things are related. And if you look at our other video, we have this Venn diagram of how those things are connected, but this is pretty easy. That one thing's connected. You can actually keep adding other files. So maybe that influencer has um, different platforms where they posted on TikTok and Snapchat, and they have that data, and you want to link it to that rate card as well, although they probably have a different rate for those different ones. So you might have to update the rate card with more stuff, but you can add more and more and link it to that and have all of this data connected so you can do some really cool stuff with it. So that's some of the power of using databases, and in this case, Tableau's view into databases to combine everything and make graphs that have data that uses everything. All right, so with that said, we have our new combined data. So I'm going to go to a new sheet, move my head over here, and you can see now, like on this dimensions and measures sections with the line that we have in Tableau, it also has the different tables. So you have that data table up there, the influencer table there, and some common things as well. So now we can choose whatever we want from all of these to make some pretty cool stuff. All right. So influencer name is really what we want, even though one of these things only has ID in it. It combines, so it actually knows the name of the influencers. So I'm going to put name there. All right, so Barack Obama and Ariana Grande and Anna Kendrick and 50 Cent. Wow, what are some interesting influencers here? So what can we do that would be fun? I really think we want to get to figuring out if something's expensive or efficient. It's usually like the cost per the number of views or the cost per the number of engagements. You can also flip that too. It's like how many engagements per dollar or how many views per dollar. So whichever way it is, just make sure you're doing the calculation in the right order, and the name of that calculation says what it is, or it'll be like way too big or way too small for what it is. The relationship's just an inverse, it's just flipped, but you want to just make sure you're describing it in the right way. So what we can do first is do a basic calculation. So I'm going to right click in that white space area or anywhere there on the left, and you can create a calculated field. I'm just going to call this total engagements. So before we even calculate that efficiency, I click in there, and this is Instagram. So I'm going to say engagements are comments plus likes plus saves. So obviously different types of engagements are coming through in a lot of the platforms. There's different types of reactions like in Facebook and things like that. But let's keep it super simple for this. Total engagements, comments, likes, and saves. That's it. Okay, so now we have the total number of engagements. Now if I put that here now, that gives me the total number of engagements for all of these influencers. Reminder that this is fake for the data. The influencers are real, the followers and the engagements rates are real, but I'm just bringing in some made up engagement data. So you could do that, and I could show you the chart for that. But what's missing here is really the number of posts. So there is a different way we can do this. So that would be, let's see, right click, create another calculated field, and we can have engagements divided by that count here. So this is in the data of the post data. So I'm going to drop that in there and call this engagements per post. And it says there's errors. Okay, so fun troubleshooting Tableau errors. What does it not like? Oh, okay, cannot mix aggregate and non-aggregate functions. Let's talk like a robot, Tableau. All right, so let's see if it lets me do that. Yay, so I put a little sum around the total engagements, and so now both functions are aggregate functions. All right, yeah. So there we go. So now we have two calculations. We have that total engagements and then engagements per post. So instead of making the size of those bubbles, that I'm going to do that engagements per post. And they're pretty similar. So I didn't do a very good job on creating my data or whatever that was, but you know, that's one thing you could certainly do. Let's do a cost per engagement. So I'm going to right click in that area again, create a calculated field, and do so cost first. So cost, I need the rate. So we've got the rate divided by the total engagements. So you can also, besides dragging and dropping, I can just start typing and it'll fill in what it has available there. So this is cost because that's the first thing before the division symbol per engagement. So cost per engagement. Let's change this to a bar chart so we can see it. I'll sort it descending. So your most expensive in this case is Adidas. We're going to call this cost per engagement. We can also do a few different other things. So cost per engagement, pretty high. So Adidas is really expensive. Let's see what's the best value is the low, except for those are 0 because they don't have any engagements. So this is one thing where, okay, we want to see if the number of total engagements, let's put that on a filter. And so I want to have at least a total number of engagements of like 5,000. So when you're doing a campaign, that's something to think about. If someone has a 100% engagement rate and they have, 32 followers, like I probably do on my account for this thing, not really relevant. We're going to have to come up with a number of, different influencers to come up with a package to reach the reach that I want to make for the campaign. So let's say minimum 5,000. Okay. So now we've got the cost. So, this is $1.70 per engagement or 1.9 cents. I forget how we ended up doing this. So cost per engagement, that should also be an average, of course, because we're on the average cost per engagement. Yeah, that's right. Okay, cool. Lana Del Rey looks like a deal. I'm a big fan. There you go. So we'll go with that 40 cents per engagement with Lana Del Rey. Obviously fake numbers. So cool. You can try different charts here. So I'm going to take that influencer ID we had, since that was the rank. I'm going to pull that on the top so we can get a little bit different kind of view. Fit entire view. See if we can get those on there. The average cost per engagement is there. See what else we can rock out with this. That influencer ID is looking a little weird. Let's make that continuous. So now we can see that 0 to 200. Let's make the axis. I'm going to double click on that since I know there are only 200 of them. It's trying to give us a little wiggle room to fit on the graph there. We're going to make the fixed end 200 because we know that's how many there are. And now we've got the average cost per engagement with that crazy Adidas one. Maybe let's exclude that so we can look at the rest and see a little bit more interesting of a graph. Can put that there. And let's go, that's the cost per engagement. Then let's do total engagements as the size and make the size a little exaggerated to see the difference and do a little opacity to see through. So there you go. And now you can see who the different influencers are. There's the weekend. Cool. So let's mark the weekend. Always show. So that's $6.66 per engagement with these numbers. And let's make color something a little bit more interesting. Maybe something else. Cool. So now you have that influencer rank, which we need to change here again. And you're showing the average cost per engagement. So that's a good reminder to make that a currency format. So right clicking there, currency custom. We do not need those zeros. That's a little bit too granular. And there you go. So that looks pretty fun. So cost per engagement. Let's duplicate that. Go back, and we were also looking at engagements per dollar as an option to do. So right click there. I don't think we did that yet. So engagements per dollar. Well, actually, let's do views per dollar, since it's the other one's just flipping it. So let's do something a little bit different. So you have your views per dollar with the rates, and this one looks like it's okay. I don't know if we have to sum it up, see what happens. Okay, so now we've got views per dollar. Pop that on there, and there you go. So we've got a different set of influencers. So you can get the reach you want with the views per dollar, or if you're going for engagement, you can get the engagement you want per dollar, or kind of look at both of them and see what combo of different influencers or different factors that you want to take together to choose the ones you want to do. So views per dollar. So that's the highest views per dollar. So that's really efficient at getting new views with whoever that is. And then the ones that are really low, not very efficient. So you're, you've got a few followers and very low there. So too bad, Elite Goulding. Sorry, huge fan though. Um, yeah, so a lot of things to play with here. You can try different things. You could just focus on saves. So maybe you were really focused on e-commerce and people saving that post because you know they'll go back and possibly purchase that fashion item or something. Uh, but yeah, so we'll come back with part two maybe later and see if we can look at future results and see how that compared to the previous results for those influencers. And what we can do too is look at uh, filtering by just the sponsored posts. And this is a field that we see sometimes. It's called a Boolean field. So is it true? Is it false? Or is there just nothing? There's a blank in there, which you may or may not want to treat as false depending on your use case. And so now just looking at sponsored posts, that allows you to do that in the filter here. You can also on the graph show that filter here, and there's a number of different ways you can make it, like a drop down, a slider. Slider is kind of weird for true or false, but you can also do different types of menu controls. So there's a drop down where you just choose true, false, and that's only one at a time, or everything. So let's keep it true sponsored. That's how it goes. And then this is how you determine whether an influencer has a good return on investment. It's a good fit for your campaign, whatever it is. This is where the analysis starts. You'll see this in a lot of influencer tools. There's so many out there where you can hire them or analyze them and everything there, but this is how it works. So good.